Welcome to About That Bible with Every Nation NYC. I'm Ailsa, I'm your host. This is Nathan, and we're going to talk about the Bible. We are here to help you to get more out of that Bible. And today we're going to talk about Genesis 1 through 11. Is that right, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
You know, we're going to dive in to some of the
Not an easy bit of the Bible.
Thanks for putting it at the beginning.
Right at the start, right in the off.
So, before we chew on some meaty questions and some confusing bits, would you be able to summarize for us what happens between 1 and 11?
Yeah, so there's a number of stories. We've got the two creation narratives. Mm-hmm. Then you get Cain and Abel. It doesn't go well. You get some genealogies in there. Oh, Tower of Babel, genealogy. And then Noah.
Everybody's favorite kid's story.
Who built the ark? Noah. That's all Obviously. You need to know.
Indeed, Noah.
Nobody died.
Nope. Tell your kids it's great. What would you say is the main point of that first 11 chapters?
Wow. So in the very off, we're introduced to God. In the first verse, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and He made it good. And then very quickly, people ruin it, and it's about the ruination of everything. So, people rebel against God. They choose their own good over God's good. They want to define it themselves. They want to be like God. And from there, everything starts going bad. Adam and Eve's children turn on each other.
Yeah,
people
that's bad.
Again try to take matters into their own hand with the Tower of Babel. And then things get so bad that God has to intervene on a very massive scale by the end of it.
There's a dog.
There's a dog.
So it goes really bad, and it's that whole spiraling down. Let's start at the beginning, because this is a massive question that I always have. So help us. We've got these two creation narratives at the beginning, chapters 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Why is there two? And why do they sort of seem like they contradict each other?
Great question. So first, we have to think about, where do these stories come from? They're really super old creation narratives that would have been passed down generation to generation, possibly all the way back to Adam and Eve. We don't really know where they came from, but they're deep oral traditions that would have been passed down the Hebrew people for generations. They're finally recorded by Moses, and by the time they get to Moses, there's two of them. So he puts two of them down. And I think that they serve different purposes, right? They're answering different questions that people would have about God, about where they came from. The first one, in Genesis 1, is the macro, the big creation narrative. God creates the sun, the moon, the stars. He separates light and dark, which is basically a meaning for them. He made time. He made the distinguishing, not like time existentially, but to the Hebrew people, God did create time, but they were thinking more like the delineations of time. Light, dark, day and night, sun and moon. And so God makes these big things. Then He creates the sky and the water, and He separates these things, and He starts to add definition into the chaos of the uncreated world. Yeah. And
it's done in a nice sort of poetic pattern.
That's right. Yeah. There was evening, there was morning, first day. There was evening, there was morning, day 2.
Yeah.
And so it was a poem. That's a good point. And we should read it a little bit differently, right? Because it's a poem.
It's not a science textbook.
No. And so it's trying to answer something different. Mostly, who made this stuff, and why did He make it? And so we get the macro in the first narrative. Yeah. And then in the second narrative, it's far more zoomed in. It just kind of starts there already is an earth. There's no trees, and so God plants a garden, and He forms humanity. And it's all about, the second one is all about people. Yeah. It's, He forms the man and the woman. He gives them job assignments. He says, name the animals, be fruitful, multiply, flourish, subdue the earth, which leads to some questions, what does that mean?
What does that mean? You've just asked yourself a question. I like that question. Let's do it. What does it mean?
To subdue the earth, literally to kibosh the earth.
What does kibosh mean?
to put it under your feet, to put it under your dominion, your control, to subdue and have dominion over. I can't remember which one it is, subdue or dominion. One of those is kabosh, to put it under you. And we read this as like sinful, greedy people when we think, well, what does God just say? Turn on your SUV and don't recycle and kill the whales and forget the pandas.
No, don't forget the pandas.
Forget those pandas.
We love pandas.
Says so. No, it doesn't.
Be nice to pandas.
And what it's saying is like these people were created to interact with nature and bring the best out of nature, to continue to bring the order that God has started in Genesis 1 and 2 and bring it to all of the earth. So he plants this garden and he says, now there's a whole wild world out there, still with full of his good creation, all this raw potential energy. Gold and onyx are in the ground, it says. And so we're supposed to pull it out and make society and build stuff, not against God, but with God.
Yeah.
It's supposed to look a little bit probably similar, but very different to what we have today.
Yeah. And with more pandas, probably.
Probably.
More pandas.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about people, so we've got Adam and Eve. The confusing bit with them is we've got Adam and Eve, and then like next chapter, it seems like we've got loads more people. And that's always been like a question for people. So you've got Adam and Eve in chapter 2. Mm-hmm. You've got the fall, just seems like Adam and Eve in chapter 3, and a snake, and God, obviously. And then by 4, you've got Cain and Abel, and then Cain kills Abel, but then Cain sees that there's lots of people. He's scared of lots of people by like 4, right? What's going on there?
Well,
why 2 to loads?
There's a couple of things. So first, we got to know the timeline is not fixed.
Yeah.
Just because there's no space between a paragraph or between a page and this page, it does not mean that no time has elapsed. And so God has created Adam and Eve, and then we do get to Cain and Abel. Yeah. And then Cain kills Abel. God sends Cain out, and Cain gets scared, right? He's like, I think he says, anyone who comes across me may kill me. Yeah. And so he's not worried about angry mobs in the street. He's worried about a potential individual. Yeah. And so time may have elapsed. We don't know. What's funny is actually in the next verse, Cain takes a wife, or Cain sleeps with his wife. We haven't heard her name. Yeah. So there's clearly more people. I believe that those people came from Adam and Eve, that they had other children. The genetic code was pure, and it was from God, and it was not it was not sin filled, is what I mean by pure, not ethnically pure, no, but it was just from God. It was straight from God, and so intermarriage between like brothers and sisters was not an issue at that point. Yeah, they were just getting the whole humanity ship off the ground. Yeah, and so there's brothers and sisters that we don't know about.
And probably by that stage, they were like living a long time.
That's right.
Who knows how old they were at that point.
That's right. So what Genesis records is like average lifespan was just south of 1,000 years.
Man, you can get a lot done in 1,000 years.
You can. So he could have come across like his great nephew or something like that. And his nephew may have kiboshed him.
Yeah. Oh, man. So I suppose you just... you realize that it's not trying to give you all the like details and make sure you know everything. It's trying to give you a specific story.
It is. Yeah, it is. What's cool, what does happen there is that Cain says his punishment is too much. Somebody might kill me out there. And God says, I'm gonna extend actually some grace to you. And God marks him. Now we have no idea what that means. Yeah. We have no idea what that means.
There's been some interpretations.
There has been. But here's what's important to know about that mark. It was a mark of grace. Yeah. It was a mark of God's protection. Cain did not deserve it. He was a murderer being sent out into the world. And God says, I'm going to put my protection on you. So that anyone who tries to mess with you will know that they're going to also incur the wrath of God if they do.
Yeah. So he was still protecting him.
Yeah.
Do you think that God was surprised by how it all went wrong? So you've got like Cain murders someone, and then it all just kind of goes worse from there. Like, was God surprised by this? Did he like think this is a mistake?
You could definitely get that impression in Genesis 6, where it says that God was sorry for creating people. This sorrow word is very difficult for me to understand, to be honest.
Yeah.
It can mean like sorrow, like grief. It can also mean to comfort, or it can also mean to regret. And so what I have the sense of is when I was growing up, we had a Chihuahua that my brother had a Chihuahua.
Yeah.
And it was like the most sheepish dog. And honestly, I hated the thing.
Yeah.
It was yappy and sheepish, but over time it grew some confidence. And one time it grew enough confidence to wander out into the road, and it got hit.
Oh.
And we had to take it and put it down.
Oh, Chihuahua.
And of course, in that moment, you're sorry. You're like, man, this is painful. And you feel sorrow and you try to comfort, and there's regret and remorse. But I don't think that God was surprised by this moment. He was filled with sorrow for humanity, and he wished that they would be comforted. He wished that there was a way to comfort them. But what was about to happen was really, really bad.
That makes sense. So there's like a difference between like sorrow and like surprise.
Yeah, he's
like,
not saying,
surprise.
guys, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, like my kids do stuff all the time. Our kids, my kids, they're mine, do stuff all the time that like I'm like not surprised by. I'm sorry they did it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So how do we deal with the flood? Because that kind of just that kind of feels a little bit like a start over. Like a do-over.
Like God just hit the cosmic reset button.
Yeah, like he was like, "Oh no, this is going further than I expected." Flood.
I think that it's important that we grapple with, like, God has given people the ability to choose. It's a real choice, but also God does know what we're going to choose. But he does need to give you the ability to choose it. Just because God knows what you're going to choose does not mean that you did not make that choice. Just like when you give our children the option between spaghetti or ice cream,
they're going to pick ice cream.
They made that choice.
Yeah.
We didn't force their hand in that choice. But and God did not force our hand as humanity to sin. However, we did choose it, and he knew that we would. And so God allowed humanity to run its course. And I think that there's some unique things that were happening at that time that forced God's hand in a really crazy way.
Like what?
Well, like a flood that wipes everybody out.
Well, that's his hand, but yeah, they were up to stuff that was just like, we need a flood.
Yeah, you get a picture at the start of Genesis 6 that something crazy was going on.
Yeah, it's not very like clear what it is, but it's kind of like heavy implication. Mm-hmm. It was crazy. There
was some crazy stuff.
Talking about crazy, I want to give you this as a final crazy question, because this is the one that I think in 1 to 11 is always like the craziest one. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you're gonna have like a great answer for it because it's so hard. Or there's just so many different answers. What on earth were the Nephilim? What is that? It's like all this stuff about humans, and then like, whew.
Let's take a look at this.
Okay.
Can we? All right.
Get that Bible out.
About that Bible. Let's open that thing, because this is. I don't want to misquote. This.
Because it's so crazy.
So what was happening? When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown."
I mean,
okay.
just slips it in. Here's just like a little paragraph.
And that's some of the crazy stuff that was happening as we lead into Moses. Because then it says that everybody was doing evil all the time, but one person God gave favor to or grace to.
Yeah.
So God's grace is still in the midst of all of the crazy that's happening. All right. What are those Nephilim about, right?
What are they?
There's kind of two readings. One kind of more conservative, and one that the authors were probably trying to get us to see. So a conservative reading would be like, at that time there were these, chapter 5 is all about genealogies.
Yeah.
There was this genealogy of kind of the good guys coming out of not Abel, because he died, but the next son, Seth. And Seth has these children that call upon the name of the Lord and are walking with God. And then meanwhile, Cain's line, they're just doing crazy stuff. One of his sons, I can't remember his son or grandson, is Lamech. And he's like, my name's Lamech, and anybody who does anything to me, I'm going to do it like 10 times what God was going to do to Cain, or on Cain's behalf. Lamech's crazy. He's just like this wild man. And so what conservative commentators will say is that the sons of God, like the sons of obedience from Seth's line, were starting to look across the aisle and see those hot girls on the other side who are doing whatever they want. Not convinced.
I don't know. Why'd you get a special name like Nephilim?
Yes.
Just like...
Yes. So probably what we're supposed to see is that something was happening in the spiritual realms. That spiritual beings were also behaving badly. That they were going wild. And so what you see is that there's a parallel between Genesis chapter 6 and Genesis chapter 3. There's a couple of key words that repeat themselves. They saw these good or attractive women, just like Eve saw the good or attractive fruit. Then they took. So they reached out their hand and took something that did not belong to them. Eve did it to become like God. And here, these spiritual beings were trying to basically redeem humanity and make them immortal or eternal. And God says, no, my spirit will be with you for 120 years, which can be read that like the average lifespan will be 120 years, which it kind of like that's like about the ceiling that we're at right now. But you keep reading through Genesis, people keep living crazy long times. And so other even ancient commentators would say that it was 120 years between this moment and the flood.
Which makes sense.
It does.
That makes sense, because the whole like how old you are and all that kind of stuff doesn't make a ton of sense. So that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It still sounds crazy.
It does. It's kind of one of those bits where it's like, are we really going to have a very satisfying answer?
We're never going to know on this side of eternity what exactly happened here. Yeah. However, what is interesting is that this provides a theological seedling of a plan for redemption, not born out of selfishness, not out of seeing and taking and grabbing hold, but out of one day a true God-man coming.
Yeah.
Who would give rather than take of himself. And of course, we're talking about Jesus, who Mary, the Virgin Mother, would be overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, conceive a God-man son, and redeem the world through his life.
And on that note, then we'll call it a day. Genesis 1 through 11.
There we go. Thank you.
Done. Thank you.